Karen Davies surveyed the manicured lawn of her Whispering Pines home, the late afternoon sun glinting off the meticulously trimmed hedges. It was a perfect suburban tableau, a monument to order and control, and Karen was its high priestess. The tranquility, however, was about to be shattered, not by some outside threat, but by the relentless, chaotic intrusion of joy. Across the street, at the edge of the community's Olympic-sized swimming pool, a raucous splash echoed off the polished concrete. Karen's jaw tightened. She saw him, Alex, the single dad who had moved in 3 months ago, laughing as his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, shrieked with delight. A bright red beach ball, a garish smear of color against the pristine blue, sailed through the air. It wasn't the ball itself that offended Karen. It was the carefree laughter, the absolute lack of respect for the unwritten quiet hours, the audacity of a life lived without meticulous self-regulation. Karen had already tried the subtle approach. She'd left a copy of the HOA bylaws on their doorstep, highlighted with a neon yellow marker at Section 4.7, Pool Area Conduct and Noise Abatement. It had been a passive-aggressive masterstroke, she thought. A gentle but firm reminder of the social contract they had all signed. But a week later, here they were, Lily's gleeful shouts reverberating through the neighborhood like a symphony of chaos. She watched as Alex, clearly oblivious to the deep violation he was committing, tossed the ball gently, allowing Lily to catch it with a triumphant squeal. That was it. The line had been crossed. This was no longer a matter of courtesy. It was a matter of principle. She reached for her phone, her thumb hovering over the speed dial for Richard. The head of the HOA. "Richard, it's Karen," she began, her voice a practiced blend of calm authority and simmering indignation. "I'm calling about the new neighbors. The situation at the pool has become intolerable. Their noise is a clear violation of the bylaws, and they've introduced a large non-regulation toy into the pool. It's a liability issue and, frankly, a safety hazard." She listened to Richard's familiar, placating tone. He promised to send an email, a gentle reminder. But Karen knew that was a toothless gesture. This required action. A line of cars, police cruisers with their strobing blue and red lights, was the only thing that could truly restore the sanctity of Whispering Pines. She ended the call with a curt "thank you" and immediately dialed 911. Her voice, when she spoke, was an even more dramatic version of her call to Richard. "Hello? I'd like to report a disturbance. It's a matter of safety and property damage. I'm at 1422 Sycamore Lane. I believe they're in violation of multiple municipal codes, and I've tried to reason with them, but they've become aggressive. They're throwing objects and shouting threats." She hung up, a sense of righteous satisfaction spreading through her. She was not a busybody. She was a protector of the peace, a guardian of the bylaws. Within 10 minutes, a police SUV pulled up. 2 officers emerged, their uniforms crisp in the late sun. Detective Sergeant Miller, his face a landscape of fatigue and quiet disinterest, approached her with his partner, Officer Jenkins, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mrs. Davies, you called about a disturbance?" Miller's voice was a low, steady rumble. "Yes, thank you for coming," Karen said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "It's a serious matter. That man, Alex, and his daughter. They've been harassing me for weeks. I tried to speak to him and he just laughed. And now he's throwing things, making a spectacle." Miller listened, his gaze drifting from Karen to the pool, where Alex and Lily were now packing up their belongings, their laughter a distant echo. The red beach ball sat deflated on a towel. "You mentioned property damage?" Miller asked. Karen's eyes widened slightly, her mind working furiously. She saw an opening, a way to cement her victim's status. He threw something at my dog, a large hard object. It was terrifying. And then he started screaming at me. Miller's eyes finally focused on her. "You have security cameras, Mrs. Davies?" Karen's heart pounded with triumph. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. She had forgotten about the new high-definition cameras installed on her home just last month. She had footage of everything. The camera perfectly captured the pool area. It would show his belligerence. It would show the dog cowering in fear. It would show her, the defenseless victim. "Yes," she said, her voice dripping with eagerness. They're motion activated, and they cover the entire front yard, including the pool. Mind if we take a look? Miller asked, already turning towards the front of her house. Of course not, Karen said, her confidence at an all-time high. She led them to her study, where she had the security system hooked up to a large monitor. She navigated the timeline to the last half hour, a slow smile spreading across her face. You'll see it all right here, she said, pointing to the screen. You'll see what I've had to put up with. Miller sat down, his face a mask of stone. He fast-forwarded through the footage, pausing occasionally, his fingers flying over the controls. The silence in the room stretched, punctuated only by the faint click of the mouse. The air grew thick with unspoken tension. He didn't need her to explain what he was seeing. He just watched, his shoulders hunched forward. Karen's smile began to falter. Something was wrong. His expression wasn't one of disbelief or sympathy. It was one of cold, professional analysis. He finally sat back, a long exhale escaping his lips. He looked at Karen, his eyes no longer disinterested. They were a pair of cold, steel-gray orbs, and in them, Karen saw her reflection, not as a victim, but as a predator. Miller looked her dead in the eye, his voice low and unwavering. Mrs. Davies, we reviewed the footage. The screams you reported, they weren't his. They were yours. And you're right. The camera caught everything. It caught the moment you walked over to their poolside belongings, picked up that little girl's toy, and threw it into the deep end. You called this an assault, but the video shows you were the only one who did any throwing. He stood up, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. And we also saw the look on that little girl's face as her father had to go into the water to get her toy. So let's try this again. What exactly happened here? The air in Karen's study was a vacuum, devoid of all but the sterile hum of the computer and the cold, professional silence of Detective Miller. Karen's carefully constructed world of righteous indignation had just been shattered by the unforgiving lens of her own security camera. She stared at the screen, at the irrefutable playback of her own hand, a blur of motion as it snatched the vibrant red beach ball from the poolside and tossed it into the deep end. The moment of triumph she had envisioned was now a public, damning confession. Her voice, when it came, was a pathetic, cracked whisper. It was an accident. I was trying to help. It was a hazard. I was just trying to move it out of the way. The words felt hollow even to her own ears. Miller didn't dignify the excuse with a response. His gaze remained locked on her, a silent, unblinking challenge. Officer Jenkins, standing by the door, shifted his weight, a quiet, almost imperceptible shake of his head at the absurdity of her attempt to backpedal. Mrs. Davies. Miller's voice was calm, but the calmness was more terrifying than any shout. We have a report here of property damage and a physical assault. The footage we just reviewed doesn't corroborate any of that. In fact, it paints a very different picture. It shows you committing a deliberate act of, well, what exactly would you call that? Karen's cheeks flushed a deep, mortified red. She tried to meet his gaze, but found herself staring at the shiny dark buttons on his uniform. It was a misunderstanding. I was stressed. They were so loud I just lost my composure. Miller nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. I understand. So, the screaming you reported on the 911 call, that was you. You threw the ball and then screamed. Is that correct? The question was a trap. If she said yes, she was admitting to filing a false report. If she said no, she was continuing a lie that was now on high-definition video. She stammered, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. I was startled. It was a reaction. Let's go talk to Mr. Davies, Miller said, standing up. Maybe he can shed some light on the situation. No, Karen blurted, her voice shrill. He wasn't here, he's out of town on business. The lie was instinctive, a desperate attempt to keep her crumbling fortress intact. Miller's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. We ran the plates on a car that was seen leaving the scene. It's registered to your husband, Mr. Thomas Davies. It looks like he came home about an hour ago. He's been cooperative. He told us where we could find the beach ball you threw. The floor seemed to drop out from under Karen's feet. Thomas had come home? How could he? He was supposed to be in Chicago. The betrayal, the swiftness of her husband's cooperation with the police felt like a physical blow. He had seen the chaos, the police cars, and had immediately assumed the worst of her. Miller led her out of the house, and Karen walked as if in a daze, the perfect lawn of Whispering Pines suddenly feeling like a mockery. They crossed the street to the pool area where Alex was now calmly coiling a hose. Lily, her small face serious, was helping him put away towels. Alex looked up, his expression a mixture of confusion and quiet concern as he saw Karen being escorted by the police. "Mr. Davies," Miller said, approaching Alex. "I'm Detective Miller. I'm just trying to get a clearer picture of what happened here. Could you tell me about the incident with the beach ball?" Alex straightened up, his movements slow and deliberate. He glanced at Karen, a deep sigh escaping his lips. "I don't know. One minute we were packing up, and the next, Lily's ball was gone. We looked for a minute, and then I saw it floating in the deep end. I just figured the wind must have blown it in." He looked down at Lily, who was now holding his hand tightly. "She was a little upset, but we just went and got it. No big deal." The simplicity of his words was a dagger in Karen's heart. He was a good man, a good father, and she had almost destroyed him. "Mr. Davies." "Your neighbor, Mrs. Davies, called the police," Miller said, gesturing to Karen. "She reported that you had assaulted her, thrown something at her dog, and were being aggressive. She said you were screaming threats." Alex's eyes widened, and he took a step back, his face a mask of shocked disbelief. "Me? That's not true. I never even spoke to her." He looked at Karen, his expression now one of hurt and confusion. "I've seen her around, but we've never had a conversation." "I'm aware of that," Miller said quietly. He then turned to Karen, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative command. "Mrs. Davies, you are being placed under arrest for filing a false police report and malicious mischief." The words hit Karen like a physical force. She stumbled back, her hands flying up in protest. "What? No! You can't do that! I'm a member of the HOA. My husband is an associate at the law firm of—" "The law firm of your husband," Miller interrupted, a flicker of a smile on his lips, "will be notified. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." The words were a hammer blow, each one echoing with finality. Officer Jenkins was now placing her hands behind her back, the cold metal of the handcuffs clicking into place. Karen couldn't believe what was happening. Her meticulously planned and executed life was unraveling, not because of the chaos she so detested, but because of her own desperate need to control it. The police, the very authority she had summoned to restore order, were now the architects of her public humiliation. As the officers led her away, Karen's eyes found Alex's. There was no triumph in his gaze, only a deep, weary sadness. And as the police car pulled out of the driveway, the flashing red and blue lights painting the perfect homes of Whispering Pines in a garish, surreal glow, a single figure emerged from the front door of her own house. It was her husband Thomas holding a duffel bag, his face pale and grim. He watched her go, not with anger, but with an expression of profound, exhausted disappointment. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just stood there. And in that silent moment, Karen knew her real punishment had just begun. The back of the police car smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, a far cry from the lavender and linen scent of Karen's suburban fortress. The sound of the patrol car's tires on the smooth asphalt was a dull, hypnotic hum, a stark contrast to the frantic, ringing noise inside her head. Her hands, still cuffed behind her back, were a constant, humiliating reminder of her new reality. The police, her self-appointed cavalry, had not come to save her. They had come to arrest her, and with every passing second, the gravity of what she had done, the perfect, cinematic unraveling of her life, settled in like a suffocating blanket. She watched the familiar, perfectly manicured lawns of Whispering Pines slide by, their tranquil beauty now a grotesque parody. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, their faces a blur of silent, eager judgment. The sight of them, the people she had so diligently policed, the very community she had sought to protect from itself, filled her with a searing, acid-hot shame. The police station was a brutal descent into fluorescent-lit reality. The air was thick with the faint, metallic scent of human misery and cheap cleaning products. Karen was processed with a detached efficiency that made her feel less like a person and more like an inconvenience. The officer taking her fingerprints had a bored, distant look, as if he had seen 100 Karens just like her. She tried to make small talk, to explain, to plead for a modicum of dignity. "I'm a member of the HOA," she began, but his silence was a heavy, suffocating weight. The words died in her throat, leaving a bitter aftertaste. Hours bled into a formless, purgatorial soup. She was in a small, stark room, a steel table bolted to the floor, the walls a depressing shade of beige. Her mind raced, replaying every moment of the last hour, searching for a way out, a loophole, a detail she could exploit. She had called Richard from the HOA, her frantic, garbled message leaving a wake of confusion. She had called her sister, who had not answered. She had not, surprisingly, called Thomas. The thought of his face, the raw disappointment she had seen as she was led away, was a wound too fresh to touch. The door finally opened, and a man in a dark suit walked in, his face a grim, familiar mask. It was Mark, an associate from Thomas's law firm. He was here, but not Thomas himself. The realization was a sharp, physical pain. Thomas had sent his subordinate. It was the ultimate statement of distance, a quiet, professional severing of all ties. "Karen," Mark said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He sat down across from her, the steel chair scraping on the floor. "Thomas asked me to handle this." "Where is he?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I need to talk to him, Mark. I can explain." "He's at home." "Packing," Mark said, his eyes avoiding hers. "I've arranged for your bail. The charges are a misdemeanor, so it's straightforward. You'll be out within the hour." He slid a document across the table. "These are the terms of your release. You need to sign here." "Packing?" Karen's heart seized in her chest. The word echoed in the small, empty room. "What do you mean, packing?" Mark finally looked at her, and his eyes held a cold, hard pity. "He's leaving, Karen. He's filed for separation. He was already planning to come home early to talk to you about some things. The police just expedited the process. The world tilted on its axis. The entire foundation of her life, the carefully curated illusion of a perfect marriage, a perfect home, a perfect life, all of it was a lie. And the pool video had just exposed it to the world. Thomas was leaving her. Not because of the arrest, not because of the lying, but because she had already driven him away. The arrest was just the final public straw. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He can't. We just had the new patio furniture delivered. We were going to go to Cabo next month." "I'm sorry, Karen," Mark said, not looking sorry at all. "The legal papers are being drafted. He wants to know if you intend to contest it. He's hoping you won't, for the sake of a clean break." She stared at the document, the words a meaningless jumble. She couldn't sign it. If she signed it, she was admitting defeat. She was surrendering her life, her power, everything. "I won't sign it," she said, her voice finding a sudden, desperate strength. "He's not leaving. He just needs to calm down. He'll come around. He always does," Mark sighed, the sound a soft puff of resignation. "He's not coming around, Karen. He told me to tell you that he's done." "He watched the video. He saw you. He saw what you did. And he said he doesn't even recognize you anymore." The words were a brutal final sentence. It wasn't just her reputation that was in tatters. It was her very identity. The person she thought she was, the protector, the guardian of order, was a fiction. A persona she had crafted to hide a dark, destructive core. An hour later, as she stood outside the station, a cold, indifferent rain beginning to fall, her phone vibrated in her hand. It was an email from Richard, the HOA president. The subject line was stark, devoid of his usual pleasantries. "Emergency board meeting, your membership status." She looked up, the rain mingling with her tears, and saw a familiar black car pull up to the curb. It was a town car, not Thomas's sedan. The driver, a stranger, got out and opened the door. "Mr. Davies asked me to drive you home, Mrs. Davies," he said, his voice polite but distant. "He also told me to give you this." He handed her a small white envelope. Karen's heart hammered against her ribs. She took the envelope, her fingers fumbling with the seal. Inside was a key. It was the key to their home. But it wasn't the one she had. It was the master key, the one she had always kept on her own ring, a symbol of her ownership, her control, and with it, a small, handwritten note from Thomas. The locks have been changed. You have 24 hours to collect your belongings from the guest bedroom. The movers will be here tomorrow morning. They will let you in. The town car, a silent, anonymous box of black leather and tinted glass, felt like a hearse. Karen sat in the back, the small, cold key from Thomas's note a lump of metal in her trembling hand. The driver, a polite stranger, had not spoken a word since he handed her the envelope, a professional wall of silence that only magnified her humiliation. She stared out the window, watching the neat uniform houses of Whispering Pines parade by, each one a monument to a life she no longer possessed. Every perfectly manicured lawn, every well-behaved shrub, every porch light left on in the dusk was a silent, judgmental witness to her downfall. She had called her sister Denise from the station. The conversation was brief and tense. "I'm at the police station. They arrested me," Karen had said, her voice a reedy whisper. "What? Karen, what on earth did you do?" Denise's voice, usually a cheerful, bustling affair, was sharp with suspicion. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. The new neighbors, they were being aggressive. "The news is all over the Whispering Pines community group chat, Karen. A police report of a woman being arrested for throwing a child's toy in a pool. Everyone's talking about you. It's not true. It's all a lie. I need you to come and get me. Thomas. He's not answering his phone." A long, heavy pause. "Karen, I just spoke to Thomas. He said you can't come to the house. He's packing. He said—" Denise's voice trailed off, a sound of profound awkwardness. "He said you have 24 hours to get your things. He's joking. He's just angry," Karen had insisted. But the cold dread had already begun to settle in her stomach. Now, as the town car pulled up to the curb in front of her own home, the dread became a hard, physical certainty. The town car was not a ride home. It was a formal eviction. The driver got out and opened the door. "We're here, Mrs. Davies." Karen didn't move. She couldn't. The front door of the house, a dark, gleaming slab of mahogany, seemed to mock her. The perfect porch, the immaculate flower pots, the soft glow of the foyer light, all of it felt alien, a stage set for a life that had just ended. She finally stepped out, the cold rain a shocking slap on her face, and the driver, without another word, got back in his car and pulled away, leaving her standing alone in the dark. She fumbled with the key, her fingers numb with cold and shock. She approached the front door, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Maybe Mark had been mistaken. Maybe Thomas was still in there, waiting for her, ready to forgive her if she just apologized. She inserted the key, turned it, and pushed the handle. The door did not budge. The lock was solid. A second turn, a third, a desperate fumbling jiggle. Nothing. Thomas had kept his word. She was locked out of her own life. She stood there, defeated, as the rain soaked through her clothes. The email from Richard, the HOA president, felt like a taunt. Emergency board meeting. It was an invitation to her own public execution. She was the agenda. She was the problem. She was no longer a board member. She was a criminal, a liar, a pariah. Just then, her phone vibrated again. It was a text from Denise. "I'm on my way. Be there in 20. Don't do anything stupid." Karen didn't know what to do. She couldn't stay there, a pathetic figure waiting on her sister's charity. She saw a glimmer of light from the community clubhouse at the end of the street. The HOA meeting. It was a desperate, foolish impulse, a final, defiant act of a drowning woman. She would go there. She would face them all. She would explain. She would demand justice. By the time she reached the clubhouse, the rain had stopped, and her clothes were plastered to her skin. She walked past the cars in the parking lot, each one a familiar neighbor's vehicle, a rolling testament to the cozy, comfortable lives she had always sought to manage. The clubhouse door was ajar, and the low murmur of voices spilled out into the night. She pushed it open and stepped inside, the sudden silence a heavy physical force. The room was filled with faces, all of them turned to her. Richard, the HOA president, stood at the head of a long table, his face a mask of stern disappointment. Next to him were the other board members, Bethany, the treasurer, whose eyes were wide with morbid curiosity, and Michael, the secretary, who was scribbling furiously in a notepad. The rest of the chairs were filled with a mix of neighbors, some with their arms crossed, others with their phones out, ready to record. Alex was there too, sitting in the back, his expression unreadable. Karen's heart pounded against her ribs. She was a spectacle. "Karen," Richard said, his voice cold and formal. He didn't offer her a chair. "You received my email. We are here to discuss your conduct. I want to explain," Karen said, her voice shaking. "There's been a misunderstanding. The police. They misconstrued everything. I didn't lie. I was just trying to protect our community." She looked around the room, her eyes pleading for a glimmer of sympathy, but she found only judgment. "That man," she said, pointing a trembling finger at Alex. "He was being loud. He was a menace. I was just trying to restore order." A low murmur rippled through the room. "Karen," Richard said, his voice rising in volume, "I have the official police report right here. It's an easy thing to check. They responded to a call of a disturbance. They reviewed your security footage. The footage shows you, Karen. It shows you throwing the ball. It shows you screaming. It shows you creating the very disturbance you called to report." Karen's head snapped towards Alex. "He said he wasn't upset. He told the police it was no big deal. He's lying now to make me look bad." Alex, from the back of the room, finally spoke. His voice was calm and steady, a gentle counterpoint to her hysteria. "I wasn't lying, Mrs. Davies. I was being honest. When the police asked me what happened, I told them the truth. I told them I thought the wind blew the ball in. I didn't know you did it. I didn't have a reason to lie. I was trying to de-escalate the situation because a police presence, ma'am, is not the kind of attention I want in my life." The room was silent. Alex's simple honesty, his lack of malice, was the final devastating blow to Karen's narrative. "We will now vote," Richard said, his face a grim, resolute mask. He didn't call for a motion. He didn't ask for a discussion. The verdict was already sealed. All in favor of revoking Mrs. Davies's membership and demanding her immediate resignation from the board. Every hand in the room went up. The vote was unanimous. Karen looked from face to face, searching for a single dissenting hand, a single moment of mercy, but there was none. She had ruled this community with a velvet fist, and now that same community, with a cold, unforgiving uniformity, had voted to cast her out. She was no longer a member. She was a ghost. She was nobody. The silence in the clubhouse parking lot was 1,000 times louder than the shouting, the unanimous vote, or the damning words of the police report. It was the sound of a world that had moved on without her, a community that had cast her out without a second thought. The cold rain from earlier had given way to a damp, oppressive chill. Karen stood frozen, the harsh white light from the clubhouse spilling onto the pavement behind her, a spotlight on her defeat. She was a pariah, a ghost in the very neighborhood she had once so fiercely policed. Her phone buzzed in her hand, the screen illuminating with a new email. It was a forward from Richard, the HOA president, a PDF document attached. She opened it with a numb, mechanical dread. It was an official letter, her name at the top, followed by a formal, cold declaration, notice of revocation of membership and demand for resignation from the board. The letter was a detailed list of her transgressions, citing not only her recent actions but also past incidents that had been anonymously reported, the time she had complained about a child's chalk drawing on the sidewalk, the time she had filed a complaint about a neighbor's lawn decorations, the time she had attempted to enforce a new rule regarding the color of recycling bins. All her petty, self-serving wars now used as ammunition against her. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness, pulling into the parking lot. The car was a scuffed, older model, a minivan that had seen better days. It was Denise, her sister. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled her knees washed over Karen. But the relief was short-lived. The moment the car door opened, Denise's face, illuminated by the dome light, was a mask of exhausted frustration. There was no sympathy there, no open arms. "Get in, Karen," Denise said, her voice a low, exasperated sigh. "The entire family group chat is a dumpster fire right now. What did you do?" Karen slid into the passenger seat. The smell of fast food and stale coffee in the car, a jarring reality after the pristine, sterile cleanliness of her own life. She tried to explain, to articulate the injustices she had suffered, but the words came out in a garbled mess of half-sentences and pathetic justifications. "The police, they didn't listen. The HOA, they all hate me. Thomas, he's being ridiculous." Denise held up a hand, silencing her. "I don't care about the details, Karen. I saw the video." "Everyone has. It's on the news. I'm not here to debate your innocence. I'm here because you're my sister and you're a mess. We have less than 24 hours to get your things out of that house. Let's go." The drive back to the house was a silent, somber affair. The minivan was a rolling symbol of her new, diminished life. She had always prided herself on being in a different tax bracket from Denise. Her life a pristine, polished version of her sister's messy, chaotic existence. Now, she was at Denise's mercy, a beggar in her own life. When they pulled into the driveway, Karen's heart seized. A large moving truck, a battered U-Haul, was parked in front of her house. The cab light was on, and she could see two men sitting inside, their faces illuminated by the glow of a tablet. The movers. Thomas had wasted no time. Denise parked behind the truck, her jaw set in a hard line. "Looks like he meant business." Karen fumbled with the key in her hand. I can't go in there. He's home. He's going to be there." "He's not," Denise said, her voice flat. "I just saw his car leave." "He's gone. He's not going to be here to hold your hand. You're on your own." The key slid into the lock, and this time it worked. The master key. Thomas had changed the locks, but the one she held now was the key to the back door, the one she had always used to get in when her hands were full of groceries. The irony was not lost on her. The symbol of her control had been reduced to a secret, shameful back entrance. The house was not as she had left it. A strange clinical order had descended upon the place. Her shoes were no longer in the foyer. The mail that had been on the hall table was gone. The air felt stale, as if all the life and warmth had been vacuumed out of it. She walked through the silent halls, a stranger in her own home. The framed photos on the walls, pictures of her and Thomas on vacation, at formal events, smiling, looked like a document of a life she had only pretended to live. "The movers will let you in tomorrow," the note from Thomas had said, but he had not mentioned what would happen if she arrived early. The two men from the U-Haul saw them through the window. One of them, a large man with a thick beard and a baseball cap, got out and walked toward the door. "Mrs. Davies?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Thomas called me. He said you'd be coming for your things. We're just sitting tight until the morning. He said you have permission to get what you need from the guest bedroom." The humiliation was a physical pain, a hot, searing flash that made her want to vomit. Thomas hadn't just had the locks changed. He had hired a security detail. He had turned her home into a crime scene, her own life a thing to be guarded and contained. Karen didn't say a word. She walked past the man, past Denise, and up the stairs to the guest bedroom. It was the only room in the house that had been left untouched. A small, sterile place that had been reserved for out-of-town guests. It was where she was allowed to exist. Her clothes had been neatly piled on the bed, her toiletries arranged on the dresser. Thomas had even gone to the trouble of leaving her some empty suitcases. She was a guest in her own home. Denise came in, her face a mixture of pity and revulsion. "He left a note for you on the bed." Karen saw it then, a small white envelope sitting on top of her folded clothes. She tore it open, her hands shaking. It was a single sheet of paper with her husband's neat, precise handwriting. It was a note, not a letter, not a declaration of love or a farewell, but a list. A list of all the things he would not be taking. The patio furniture, the expensive Italian leather sofa, the 6-burner Wolf stove, the custom-built walk-in closet in the master bedroom. It was a list of all the things she had spent years building, all the symbols of her perfect life, now rendered worthless, abandoned. At the bottom, in the same neat handwriting, was a final sentence. "You can have it all. I just want my freedom back."